Hello and welcome to the DoneJS Contributors Meeting. Today is Friday, October 27th, 2017. My name is Jason Lahara, coming to you from Long Beach, California, but back in the 1970s.
This is Justin from Chicago. I love banana cream pie.
Woo!
This is Kevin from West Point, Illinois, and this costume really hurts my head.
This is Matthew from Kentucky, and I'm dressed as Adri's twin today. Strange.
Hi, I'm Shif from Algiers in Algeria.
Hey, Sheriff, good to see you. And we've got a bunch of other people who are joining us today as well. We're going to have this hangout focused on demos in just a little bit. First, Kevin or Justin and Matthew, do you guys want to give updates on the on what we've been working on? Or do you want to just do that as part of demos?
Yeah, let's just do it as part of demos.
Okay, sounds good. Anyone want to start off? Want to start us off?
I will. I
Cool.
will.
Thanks, Justin.
So I've worked on getting a 4.0 build out the door. We have a JS bin that I linked to in this forum post with CanJS 4.0, which is all it is right now, for the most part, is can component stash bindings. We're going to start adding other things to it, but it does include some of the logging stuff that we're going to show off today, such as the ability to get a element, the span in this case, that is the 0, and then show how its value is derived and the observables that it depends on, and also when you click something, see what actions CanJS is actually taking. So we're going to start adding more things to this. I think Can Connect is going to land next week. Also Can Route. We'll probably get the core up by the end of next week, and then just kind of go from there. The other thing I want to say is I've happily commented out in our build the old IE browsers for 4.0. Of course, when this build just ran in Travis, you'll never expect what broke the build. Well, it was Microsoft Edge, of course. The tests are not working in Core and Microsoft Edge, but every other browser works. So eventually, someone's gonna have to fix, or I'm gonna have to go in and fix those 17 remaining broken tests. So still a good start. That's my status.
So we're dropping IE11 also? I thought we were keeping that one.
Well, I'm dropping it for now, and then we might backfill it later. We'll make that judgment later. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Who wants to demo next?
I will.
Cool.
If I can find my spot. I've been working on a new API, new zone API for our SSR stuff. And part of that, I created a guide for building a React application and using our DoneSSR zones to server render that app. So what our SSR zones do is they provide a context for you, a DOM environment, and then a set of utilities to do all kinds of stuff, such as like there's a bunch of HTTP2 push ones that will like push any fetch requests. There's some that there's ones that provide like a DOM environment. There's ones that like do special stuff for like CanJS routes. You use Steal over and over again. You use your app over and over again through Steal. So what this guide actually does is it just uses kind of the default tools that React developers usually use. So it only uses DoneSSR for as far as DoneJS things go. So it creates the application. Eventually, you start creating a server. This is using JS DOM, which is a Node.js DOM implementation. In DoneSSR, we use can simple DOM by default, which is kind of a more simplified version. So as part of this, I've built this new CanZone.js DOM, which provides JS DOM instead. So we might eventually we might migrate towards using that instead. So it looks like this, pretty simple to use. You just create a zone, you wait for the zone to complete. This is kind of the basic configuration. Later on in the guide, you create a HTTP2 server using, where is it, DoneJS Speedy, which is our fork of the Speedy library that kind of fixes a couple of bugs that they had. H2 support just landed in Node.js, actually, like in the core. And we don't support that currently, but I think I want to hopefully in the future. But the guide adds two new zones to support H2. One's push fetch, and again, this will, whenever your app does a fetch request, it will start pushing it out. It also adds push mutations, and this is what facilitates incremental rendering. So yeah, this is the guide. The plan is I'm going to finish this up, and hopefully early next week, all this will be released as part of a DoneJS 1.1. So that's me.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you, Matthew.
Matthew, the only thing, I don't know if you saw my presentation that I made about this, but it looks like almost the exact same thing as your guide. It just has them building up the API from the bottom.
It's very similar. My guide is a different app. It doesn't use Steel, but it's very similar, yeah.
Okay, cool. I like it. All right.
Sweet. Who'd like to go next?
I can go next real quick, or go ahead.
Kevin, go ahead.
I'm going. So what I've been working on is, and with Austin also, is adding all the features that we need so that we can remove the old features that we don't want anymore in the next version of Stash 4.0. So I'm going to show a couple of those. So the main things that we're trying to remove are these special keywords, the things that start with %signs or used to start with an at or whatever. That also is still in the code. We want to delete all of that. So let's take a look at this. Yeah, so now if you run code like this, you'll get this warning that says key is deprecated. Use this new keyword we have called scope. Use scope.key instead. So if I do that, everything should still work and the warnings go away. So that's awesome. The same thing is true if you're using like index or yeah, I think that's those two. The other thing is we used to have reference variables that were using this asterisk, and one of those, the special one, self, for doing recursive templates. So I can run this one, show you what happens. If you run this, it'll say self is deprecated. Use scope.view instead. So same thing. All these special things are going to be in this one scope keyword. So, cool. That one works. You can also create your own reference variables. So if you wanted to do like little thing, you used to be able to do.
Hey, Kevin, you're muted. There you go.
Oh,
As you type something.
I don't know how to turn that off. It mutes because of my loud keyboard every time I type. Try to type quieter.
Types, yeah. Type quiet.
It's my impression of how Kevin types.
Technical keywords. Probably. So yeah, so this is deprecated too. If you, this is deprecated too. If you want to use variables now, you can put them in this special thing, scope.vars.
You're muted.
Yeah, Kevin, I would just assume you're
I know.
muted whenever you're typing.
Yeah, I wasn't talking. It's fine. Cool. Change that. It works. Yeah, so we have docs for all this stuff. All of the old ones are now deprecated in the docs and deprecated with warnings. So you can see special is deprecated, all self is deprecated. All these reference variables are deprecated. And we have new docs for scope that show what you can do, and then have links for the bigger ones for scope.vars and scope.view, which are a little bit bigger. One other cool thing that we added, last thing that I'll show, is the scope also now has the file name of the template that you're working in, and also the line number. So you can say, like, this is. And hopefully, yeah, it'll tell you this is app template because that's what I named it. If you're using Steel Stash, the file name will be set for you to the actual file name, and then the line number is the actual line number of your template. Not super useful. There's probably only a couple of places where that would actually be something you'd want to do, but it's very cool that we can do that, and it also makes it really easy for us to add file names and line numbers to all of our warnings and errors and that kind of stuff, which is really helpful. So. Cool. That's what we've been doing. Most of the stuff.
Does it feel like how does it feel coming out of like a long shower? Does it feel really good and clean?
I think next week when we can actually go in Stash 4.0 and delete all of the old ways, it will feel amazing.
That'd be cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. John, did you want to go?
Sure. Mine is more just a quick note than a demo. So yeah, we just we changed the define map whenever you extend a define map to not set properties whenever you use invalid short names. So for instance, if you just set like a value of 0 or some random string that is not a type like Boolean or string or number, you get an error now saying it will give you the property that you tried to set, and it will tell you the short name of the define map. And it just doesn't set it at all. So if you, for some reason, were expecting those to be there, they no longer will be. And that's it for me. And it has a link here to the documentation. You can find these things under prop definitions under can define. That's all I got.
Sweet. Thanks, Sean. Who would like to go next?
I can take the mantle up.
Sounds good.
Let's share some screen here.
Does anybody else feel like we should do this every time? Have costumes on?
No, I mean, I would run out eventually, right? And a lot of my good masks are full face, so it would be, it'd actually be hard to hear me when I'm talking. I know, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would be like, where's the problem in that? All right, so this week we released version 1.0 of Can Observe. Can Observe is essentially a new way of approaching observable data, where instead of having classes that have particular ways of triggering the events that happen on key changes and value changes, we are now actually using the proxy feature of latest ES script or whatever to actually just create an interceptor for property gets and property sets on regular objects, and that actually will then be able to trigger things. So here's a very simple observe. I've got an observe on an empty object right now. You can actually see that it gets reported as a proxy by the engine to the console, and the target is in fact that original object. Just should be able to show you. So, so this is version 1. Just to be clear, like we've got this, and yeah. So this is there's a couple interesting things about this in that the certain special properties like the CID don't really on the original object. They are there, but they're actually being provided through this interface from the the can meta symbol. So essentially, like this original object has a symbol put on it, right? You can actually see it here. So the can meta symbol is actually on the original object but hidden, and then the observable is reading a lot of its information about how to handle events and such from that. So let's try some basic stuff here. So we'll set some properties. All right. So on the original data, I said a property foo. That's also. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I just realized why this is going weird. It's because I actually was observing the wrong object. There we go. All right. All right. So whatever's on the original object is also readable from the proxy. And same thing goes the other way. So if I set property on the observable, then on the original object is there as well. All right. This is, of course, basic. So some more fun stuff here, though, is if I actually set a property on the original object that is a plain object, or any kind of object, really, I actually examine the same thing through the proxy, that also becomes an observable proxy. So this way, like every property access down a path, a dotted path, or whatever, can be listened to at any level for changes. So let's actually do a property listener here. So we'll actually do an on key value on the observable, and we'll actually just use the bar, and then we'll console log whatever comes out of that.
Brad, you should make your window so the bottom isn't at the bottom of the page. Otherwise, you can't see. Just make your window height a little bit shorter and drag from the bottom up.
Okay, I'm actually just sharing the window.
That's better.
Okay. Well, that works. What you just did is fine.
All right, cool. All right, so now we actually have a listener on the original property. And if I set a value on that, we actually get a dispatch here that actually shows us the changes in properties. And what's cool about this is, let's say we actually did an observable on an array. There we go. Observe an array. And we'll actually have a actually just listen to add on this one. So because this is still compatible with CanJS 3, in addition to having reflection symbols for listening to key values, it can also do regular event listeners. So this will change.
Yeah,
this will change for CanJS 4, but I'll actually talk about all the new features of that in a future demo when that becomes more interesting. So
why are we doing that in 3 though?
Why are we doing that? Compatibility with CanView Live. CanView Live requires added event.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with CanJS 4.0, CanView Live will no longer require that. We'll be using patches, and so I will be probably spending a lot of time in demo going over patches. But this particular version does not use patches, so we won't have to worry about that just yet.
I mean,
so now,
part of this is that like no one should have to know about any of this. Like that's partly the goal of this, is that all the binding methods no one should even really have to know about. You should just have your objects, mutate them, do whatever you want. CanJS's system picks up on the observability. You shouldn't be binding to a proxied array yourself.
Right, and to be fair, this is only really for demo stuff. Like I wouldn't have to do this, but I actually could make, for something that looks a little bit more like a real world thing, I can make an observation on, actually, let's do, there we go. So just making observations on these works fine because they are normally observable, right? So if I'm actually doing a push now,
but you hit the bind on that observation.
Oh, yeah, of course. Right. Oh, well, of course I'm going to do that. Then I should actually return the length.
Yeah.
Do the console log in the handler. Okay. Wait, can I do that? Okay, so we'll listen on the observation now and do console log of whatever new value comes in. All right, and so now the observation is bound, and that actually should listen on the observation. So we'll have the regular one on we'll have the event that's on the observation itself, and also the observation that's listening on it, both fire. So there's the logging from the observation, and there's the one from the observe.
Are these gonna have like that log method and stuff, or is it gonna, how's that gonna work?
Which log method do you mean?
Like the stuff Manuel and Christopher are working on.
That'll probably make it into the version 2 that works with CanJS 4.0.
Yeah, I don't know if these will have log, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they would. I wouldn't want them. I wouldn't want a mutate thing.
I didn't hear what you said. You kind of went digital there, Matthew.
Oh, I said I probably wouldn't want them to add any functions. I wouldn't want.
Yeah, I mean they should look exactly like arrays and objects.
So could there be like a can reflect way to do the same thing?
Yeah, we might, but I mean, alternatively, you could always just create an observation. We can. I don't know. We'll see when it comes to those what we do there. That's a good question.
You'd still want to be able to see them as something that changed, like you did a log what changes me on your span or whatever, like you were showing. You'd still want to see the can observe.
Well, that will definitely work. They will have
right?
those symbols, so that works. But there is no like log symbol. Like there's just log.
Oh, like the actual log function.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean we can certainly we haven't implemented get key dependencies, but that's something we could easily put in as needed.
These wouldn't have key dependencies. They would just, yeah. Cool.
Anyway, it's awesome.
All right,
Hey guys, can I go real quick?
Oh yeah.
I don't have a demo. I just want to mention a couple of things. I worked on the Chicago bus tracker with Bianca and Justin. I think this was demo the last time. And I also worked with chasing this last days, just putting together some approaches for the sidebar. And I think he's going to actually show where you guys settle in. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Edri. And actually, I'll go next for demo, so I can show off where we're at with the sidebar. Let me share my screen and present myself. Cool. Okay, so this is a local copy of the site. Looks similar to what we had before. But when you click on API docs, you'll see that we've grouped the section, all of the APIs by these purposes like observables, modeling, views, etc. And to start off, we only show the packages that are in the core collection. So these are the packages that people most commonly need to know about, especially when you're just starting off with CanJS. To see everything else, there's these little plus icons, these little expand icons. And then that'll show you everything that's in the other collections too. So like under observables, there's stuff under ecosystem, infrastructure, and legacy. And then if you want to, you can collapse those, and you can open and expand any of these. When you, let's say you search for something that isn't shown here. Let's search for Can Ajax. We go to the result for Can Ajax, you'll see that it shows up under the infrastructure collection in JS utilities, and that's already automatically expanded for you. Let's say you expand observables, and you come back to the site at some point.
Jason, we should probably put infrastructure above ecosystem.
Okay, yeah. So you've expanded observables, and you come back later to the site, and the site will remember your preferences for what you have expanded and collapsed. I am failing to think of anything more to demo related to this. I'm finishing up the last little design parts. Again, thank you to Adri for working with me this week. We went through a few iterations of the designs and still settling things. Some of this was changed last minute by me. So still settling things today, but working to get this shipped hopefully beginning of next week. Any questions, comments about this?
Looks really good. I like
Cool.
the I like the DOM utilities now that it's not a link. I think it does make those distinctions a little bit easier to look through.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Who would like to go next? Austin, Christopher?
I can go next.
Okay, go ahead, Austin.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Take that as yes. So what I'm going to show you is, this is going to be short and sweet. We did some work with call expressions. So in Stash, all the helpers used to call them more like this. So you just have a helper name with a space and then whatever you're passing into it, and then use spaces to separate any values that you pass in. So now you use the parentheses, so it's kind of like a function call. And the same thing works with hash expressions. So you just pass the hash expressions in as kind of a separate argument there. There was some problems specifically using the call expressions with hash expressions, which is most of the work that went into this. That was actually throwing an error if you used the two together. So we had a test for all of that. And this is kind of what we're trying to move people towards using, because it just is more clear and more readable. And if I go over here, check out the demo page, you can see everything works. That's all I got.
Sweet. Thanks, Austin. Manuel, Sheriff, Christopher, who'd like to go next?
I go.
Cool.
So it's based, Justin, briefly, guys, you hear me all right? Everything's good?
Yep.
All right, it's Justin touched on this briefly when he started. There's a can queues, which I believe is replacing can events. It's got a log method, and when you call that, any events or queues or whatever that get triggered after that point will get logged to your console. Yep.
We call them tasks, technically.
There it is. Sorry, couldn't remember. So this is a demo.
What's a task?
It's like an event. It's the equivalent from events from can events.
Things in the queue, right?
It's a function. It's basically just a function to run. That's all. It's a function that includes its context and its arguments, and sometimes there's a little bit of meta information around it.
So this is an example from can component. It's just the next previous paginator component. And when we run this with the queues.log, all these different tasks fired when we changed the when we click the test is clicking next. So we've logged like what the function that ran was, and then we named them according to, in this case, according to the stash, so it's a little easier to trace back. And then we log the actual task over here, which among all the arguments and the context and whatnot. Also in the meta, there's this reason log that actually details. So the define maps offset changed to 20 from 0. So that's what happens when you click next. So this whole chain of things, so you can see everything that triggered as the page rendered.
Cool. Thanks, Christopher. Did anyone else have something to demo? Manuel?
Yes, I'll go next.
Cool.
Screen share. So what I've been working on is related to what just Christopher showed, and I've been implementing a lot of, mostly two things, a log function on observables, and also there is a can debug package, and I've been working on a function called log what changes me. So for the demo, I just have a simple define map here. The function is also available in other observables, and this define map has regular stuff, a first and last property, and then we have a compute from both the first and last. And if we go to my browser, let me just refresh here. I attach the person instance that I created to the window, so I can change stuff. And when you modify one of the properties, you can see that there is an output here, and this output comes from the call to person.log that I made on line 20. So back to the browser, something to notice is that only the first property is being logged right now. And if you back to the map, you can see that there is also a full name, and that isn't log. And the reason why it isn't log is because we are not, when you call log, there is no side effect introduced, there is no computes being bound. So if you wanted to see the full name in the output, you need to make sure that it is actually bound. What makes me think is that probably we need just to maybe indicate in the output that the full name is not bound or something to warn the user. But you can see now that when I bound the full name compute, I can get now outputs from that. And the same happens if I change anything, any of the dependencies like last. So, okay, that was the log. And the other function that I was working on is log what changes me. And that does exactly what it says in the function name. And basically what it does is just show you all the observables that are dependencies of the property that you are indicating. So let me go back to the browser, refresh this. And let me actually go back to here and comment down the line where I'm binding full name, because I want you to show you a rough edge with this output. And it's like, since the compute is not bound, you don't get really information about the full name, like the properties that are part of it. So you need to be aware of that. I think in this output, probably we could do better and maybe show that the compute is not bound. Commenting this out and refresh. Now we get the first and last property, which you would expect, and you have references to the objects in the console log, so you can click around and inspect stuff. And yeah, I think that's okay. I forgot something else. You can do also the log what changes me in actual DOM elements. So let me go back to. So what I have here is just a simple stash template that has an H1 with a lookup expression for the full name property. And then I just appended that to the document body, and I'm grabbing the H1 reference and passing that to log what changes me. And if we go back to the browser, we now get in the console log, we get the actual heading element, which is the stuff that I passed to my function. And then you get all the observables that are bound to that element. And once again, you can click around and see the internals of this stuff. And that's it for me, I think.
Wow, that is really, really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, did anyone else have any updates or demos that they wanted to share before we move on to topics?
The only other thing, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one quick note I forgot to mention regarding the call expressions and hash expressions. There is a code mod to update that. So if you're wanting to move your project over to that, you can do that with very little effort on your part.
Awesome.
So yeah, I just want to give a little bit more context to like how this stuff works and what it's actually showing. So this example here, right? This is just a counter view model, has a count property and an add method that adds. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay, so similar to what Manuel showed, is I am getting this counter view model's count span and asking it, tell me what changes you. And I just want to go into a little bit more detail about like what these things mean and how we got this to show up, because it's going to be important for anybody contributing to CanJS kind of going forward, that they know how the system works and can make sure they're complying with it to keep things nice and readable. Essentially, every type that we have now, we try to give it a name, and we have this special canReflect get name that, when given an instance of a scope key data, tries to kind of a name that makes somewhat sense, right? So really what happens, and I'm going to get really into the details right now, but CanView Live, when this stash is building up this template, it builds what's called a scope key data observable for count. And scope key data internally uses canObservation to run on its read method to figure out what the actual count value is, right? That canObservation actually has a dependency of the counter view model's count variable. So that's why you see this kind of scope key data is really the parent to observation. Observation is really the parent to counter view model. Right? And that's why they're named these things, because really what this observation is a scope key data read method trying to figure out what is the count variable. So it's kind of like count is wrapped with scope key data read for this observation being used by scope key data. So what happens when you then click something with that queues.log, right? So I have this queues.log just logging what flushes as things happen, not as tasks. You can also listen when tasks are registered. When you log flush, that logs like as tasks are happening. This tells you essentially the methods that are happening. Okay, the observation scope key, the observation will first note it'll have a dependency change because the count property changed. Then that observation is going to update itself. Because of that observation updating itself, the scope key data is saying, hey, I just changed. And because of that, CanView Live text updates essentially the text node that's right here. So it takes a little bit of, I think I'll take people, we're going to eventually write up a guide to kind of explain the naming and conventions and things like that. But once you know it, like, I don't know, it is so much easier for me lately to debug like actual CanJS bugs. I can't imagine what it's like to just to debug an application. And also the stack traces are way better now, because you'll actually see in the stack trace, this will be the name of the function. And that is like, oh, okay, it's an observation. An observation would just change, one of its dependencies changed, that is trying to figure out what the count in the template is. Like that is, I can't even express how much easier certain things are because of this little bit of information. Now, finally, where this comes from is pretty much everywhere in CanJS now, we are doing two things. functions, often important functions that are going to be part of the call stack, we are doing this trick where you can take a function and set its name property to whatever you want, right? So in this case, I can actually maybe even find a better, actually I'll do it in can observation because we actually see can observation. The function that you pass to can observation is like your can compute, but it's just lower level and much faster. Can observation, when its dependencies change, it has this onDependency change method, and what we do is we name its onDependency method to use the name of this observation. Where does the observation get its name? Again, reminding everybody that like you'll see observation, bracket, and then some name inside of here. Well, it actually gets that name from the function itself. So if you look at can observation, where it's got this symbol for get name, it is essentially getting the name of the constructor, and then it's trying in between these brackets to give some same name for this observation. In this case, we just get the name of the function. So if you create an observation and you give it a nice name, your function is well named, then the observation and all of the observation's methods that are important will take on the name of that function. So that's why we see this that's why we see these nice names here and including the name of the function. So it's like, hey, this is the name of the observation that basically takes the name of its function. And then we have methods on it as well, or equally as names. So that gives you this nice naming essentially. So the big thing to remember is make sure your types have a can reflect get name symbol on them that can reflect can use. And then if there's any important functions that you want named, you can use this pattern to name those functions. And we only do this in development mode. So for performance reasons, you won't have these kind of logs in production, but they will be there in development. So a little bit more context on all of that.
Cool. I feel like that was helpful. I way better understand what's going on now.
Yeah, it's mostly we're just naming things, either the function names or that symbol.
Yeah. Cool. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to share a demo before we move on to topics? Nope. Cool. Justin, floor is back to you.
Yeah, this will hopefully be a fast one. If there's no complaints about it, I would really like to implement this auto mount on can component or some other name. I'm very open to suggestions on names, but I was just thinking this is something it's kind of like our auto render, but just done through component. You would put auto mount true, and then essentially if you have, like this is another example, components will start, if they have their auto mount true, they'll basically immediately at that point when the component is created, look for a my counter in the page and then take over that element if it doesn't already have a view model. And then also they will set themselves up as listeners for mutation observers to know when elements are inserted. And if a my counter just happened to be inserted, it would take over that element as well if it didn't have a view model. It wasn't already kind of like created through can component. Now, can element, of course, is going to be able to do a lot of this stuff anyways. In some ways, we're just providing what like a hack job on top of what the custom elements API should do for us in the future. But I really want that hack job because I think it's a nice, easy way of like bootstrapping, a page, which is just to say like, I'm kind of sick of having people go through like the whole create a template and then in your page and then get that template, then render it, and then you've also got another component somewhere anyways. To me, it seems just a lot easier to like have people put this auto mount true, and then you can just put your your root component in the page, and it will work.
So isn't this something that we would want to always happen with the global build and never happen otherwise? It's pretty much the use case, right? Is you want to use it in JS bins?
Yeah, it is a lot the use case, although I could see setting up the root application in a similar way. Like,
but then, like you're setting up this listening on mutation observers for something that's never going to happen. Right. Like adding a mutation.
But if it's just one, to me, it's not. We already set up mutation observers globally and do stuff there. One additional function isn't, I don't think, if it's just one component, isn't really going to break the bank. And if we wanted, I guess we could have two different forms of auto mount. We could have like auto mount once and kind of auto mount forever. If we were really worried about performance, which would be like auto mount once would just essentially, it could even just do it right now, just like presumably you would have to already have my counter in the page, or it would just keep doing that until it eventually saw a my counter element added to the page, and then it would just not do that. I'm okay with that, but either way, like I guess I still see it as like kind of an easier setting up of your, and kind of encapsulating your application. Everybody right now is already asking like, hey, how do you do DoneJS applications and like encapsulate one and the other? And the answer is always like, hey, you do it like a component. I could see us actually changing done auto render a little bit into something more like you just are exporting a component. But done auto render is a little bit weird. I don't want to like divert this conversation because of that, because that has its own weird constraints, like the head element and things like that I haven't really thought through. But yes, this would be, I think, still for a default basic CanJS application, this could be a recommended way of doing it. I don't know.
I like this idea if it doesn't have any serious performance implications. I'm just curious if there's, like, for naming, is there anything that we can take similar to, I think for custom elements, it's like an upgrade process, or maybe someone more knowledgeable can say what terminology they use, if there's anything that we can reuse for that.
What do you mean by upgrade process?
I'm not super familiar with custom elements, but my understanding is that there's, like, when a custom element is already defined in the page, there's some sort of like upgrade process that happens. Yeah. Is there, I mean, is it called upgrading, or is there a term that is used?
I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Yeah, if there's something related to that we could use for the name for this, that'd be cool.
Yeah, there's some life cycle. Adopted? No. Maybe it's just connected? I don't know. That's actually, maybe it's gone now. Unless you use connected for both.
No, connected is when something's inserted into the page.
Yeah. But then I don't see what...
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
But what if you had your definition after the element was already in the page?
It's still called connected. It's not a life.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is maybe they're just double using the same thing, which is a little weird to me, but whatever.
How's this feature? It is weird. How's this feature differ from can auto render?
Well, can auto render, you have to create like a script tag for, and it has to have type, text, stash, and all of that, which is just a little, I'm finding, having do all these JS bins and whatnot, I'm finding the effort of like explaining that as really annoying and a lot to like can stash from. Okay, now okay, you're right. You could go auto render and just put auto render, and then you would just have my counter. But then you've got to create that element, and you have to have the auto render true. Where this gets rid of that with, I think, much less work.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The file navigator simple guide, like the hardest part is the very first step.
Yeah.
Like the thing that people struggle with the most is getting anything on the page. I agree with that, and that's the same reasoning I had behind making Can Element the what we show all the time.
No, yeah, but Can Element isn't going to be done by Wednesday when I give the next DoneJS Chicago, and I was wanting to build this in 4.0 and to have that guide use this. So that's why I'm bringing it up now, because I wanted to go ahead with this and see how people feel about it, to just make the whole clock one big component and teach people that way.
I like that. I just don't want this to be like, oh, we already have this, so we don't need to do Can Element. Because I still think this is worse.
No, we need to do Can Element. Because definitely Can Element gives us a lot more and gives us a kind of newer surface area to experiment more with. So, I'm not at all saying this replaces the desire for me to want to do Can Element.
Yeah, the only tricky thing about this is now we have auto mount true that you have to add to get this behavior, and it's changing what has to be explained. Although I think this is
I thought about doing it automatically, but then for the performance reasons that I was talking about, I decided against it, because we could do it for every single element, but that seems too much. But I don't know. It's, I guess Can Element would do it natively for every single element. So then we have Can Element.
So the only other thing I'm thinking is maybe there should be a function. So you call can component extend and then call mount on that or something like that. I don't know. I think adding it in that definition is confusing. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Because we already have leak scope and things like that. That's why I felt that it was natural to do it there.
Yeah, I just think it's suffers
I'll
from
put it
the
this
same
way.
problems that leak scope does, that nobody understands it.
I'm not hearing an argument that I shouldn't go and do it in the pre-release of 4.0, because we can always change it later. So please keep the discussion alive. We can absolutely keep the discussion alive on the name or the implementation. I just want to make it work, and then we can figure out the API later.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, that's all I have. I guess this did prompt one other question real quick then. Is Can Element, how is that going to work with SSR? Do we foresee problems there? Would we have to support the custom element stuff in our DOMs to make SSR work?
Yeah, I mean, Shadow DOM will not work in SSR, yeah.
But what about these lifecycle hooks and stuff like that? Does Can Element currently, is it using a polyfill? I mean, do we just have to use a polyfill against JS DOM or something? I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, you could do that.
You've done it. There is one.
There is a polyfill. I've never used it against JS DOM, but
Polymer one or something.
So is JS DOM the default in SSR now?
No, not currently.
But it will be, maybe?
I would want to see perf, but probably, I think.
Okay.
Cool.
Sure, we have updating cancelable DOM and all that stuff.
What?
Yeah.
I hear what you said.
He said it beats updating canceled DOM.
Oh, you switching to that? Yeah. No, that's my only concern with Can Element right now is if in server-side rendering, what that's gonna necessitate. So
somebody asked me this at one of the DoneJS Chicago's. Does using Shadow DOM, is that worse for SEO? Is there a big problem with SEO and Shadow DOM?
I mean, just to the extent that it can't be, seen. I mean, yes, I would say yes.
Yeah. So we would maybe for SSR not want to use.
You can't SSR Shadow DOM, so you can only SSR Light DOM. So that's the only thing that's possible. So you'd have to do some type of upgrade process when you do rehydration, is you push it into the Shadow DOM or something like that. You'd have to know what goes where.
To be clear, CanJS doesn't really have Shadow DOM right now. They were asking about in a hypothetical future, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting problem. You'd almost want I don't even know how you would do that.
So we have an issue, right, to allow you to configure whether it gets rendered to Shadow DOM with can element. It's you'd want to not.
Current can element it is configurable.
Oh, it is. Okay.
But the thing is, if you don't have Shadow DOM, now you don't have what's it called? Slots. You can't put stuff where you want to put them.
Yeah.
That's weird. It's too bad they can't say here's your Shadow DOM as part of
Yeah, there's a proposal for a declarative Shadow DOM, but I think Apple doesn't like it for some reason. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Or a special slot that's here's the Shadow DOM for initialization, so you don't have to.
I mean, we can make SSR work. We would just have to mark the boundaries, and then on rehydration, push stuff into the Shadow DOM. But then again, then it's kind of weird because the style, Shadow DOM blocks. It does style encapsulation, so you would not have style encapsulation for a second.
Yeah, it's really weird, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good to think about. I don't know if I should scratch my chin or scratch the. Maybe not that. It's a little weird.
All right. Did anyone have any other topics before we go? Cool. All right. Thanks for everyone. Thanks to everyone who gave demos. I thought the demos today were really, really good. If you're watching this on YouTube, either live or the stream afterwards, thanks for watching.
And subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Share with your friends. Yeah.
Next, so we're on a every other week schedule. So our next regular contributors meeting will be in 2 weeks. We will be, I think next week is when we'll be sending out the next survey. So we'll have a one-off video for going over the survey items. It won't be as part of the regular contributors meeting, I don't think. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks with the survey results to talk about what we'll be working on in the next 6 weeks. So thanks for watching. See you guys.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep. Bye.